Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius podcast. My guest today is Ben Brown. He's an expert in nutrition, fitness, real-world fat loss, as he calls it. He's host of the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show. So we're going to talk about Ben's background, how he got to where he's at, and what his particular insights are on fitness and living better. So welcome, Ben.
Well, thanks for having me, Richard. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, people like you that I know that are either really, I guess they're counseling others either in fitness or in medical issues, whatever it is. They always have an interesting backstory. So it's okay with you. Please share yours and, tell us what it was like before, things were good with you health-wise.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate you asking and having me on. It is interesting, isn't it? I think that for a lot of health practitioners and clinicians, oftentimes they've had their own personal struggles or had struggles with loved ones that have kind of propelled them into essentially having to become experts in whatever that field is. And it was not dissimilar for me in terms of I grew up having a lot of gut issues through high school and through college, a lot of gastrointestinal issues, IBS type symptoms. I'd throw up a lot after meals, and kind of conventional medicine doctors couldn't really figure out what was going on. In high school, I was on a myriad of different antacid medications and even got an endoscopy where they put the camera down your throat to look at the lining of your stomach lining, and couldn't really diagnose anything. And so I kind of had to take it upon myself to figure out what was happening and started to essentially study nutrition, which I did over the course of my high school, my college career, my graduate school career. And I've always been into health and fitness. I played sports in high school. I played rugby for University of Arizona in college, and then came up to Phoenix to go to Arizona State University for graduate school for a master's degree in exercise and wellness, and continued to play high-level men's club rugby. And so throughout, my graduate studies, I was training athletes in the gym. I kind of started a personal training business, and then really just continuing to explore kind of like nutrition as the biggest lever to pull as it pertains to my issues, and inevitably ended up studying with some really remarkable practitioners, started to study functional medicine, identified I had a nasty bacterial infection called H. pylori that had been housed in my stomach lining probably for quite some time. And it was really that in conjunction with years and years and years of antibiotic misuse, just from having parents, baby boomer parents who's to their best ability did what the doctor said to do, which, me growing up in the 80s was, more antibiotics essentially, and not knowing what we know now. And that had really wreaked havoc on my stomach lining, on my intestinal lining, and had contributed to a myriad of different food sensitivities. And so it really was the process of undoing the damage that had been done. I learned nutrition. I ended up going back to school for a second master's degree in clinical nutrition. And like I said at the beginning, beginning, Richard, was really all of the skills that I had developed over the years to heal myself, I realized was a powerful skill set that I could then apply to others. And so that's what we do now. That's what we do now in my business, is working with individuals around their nutrition, their lifestyle, their training to get leaner, to get stronger, to get healthier, and to really build unshakable confidence and limitless self-belief.
So, I guess I won't call patients, but, the people that you see, what ages, what demographics, like what's a typical story someone has when they come to see you of their frustration?
I work with a lot of hard-charging moms and dads who are usually running a business, they're entrepreneurial, they are, they're a decision maker, they're an executive, and they've kind of reached a sort of a pinnacle in their life. Usually kind of 35 to 60 is my range, but they're sort of in this juncture in life where they have accomplished a certain amount in their career. Usually they have a young family, a marriage, and they've achieved quite a lot. But the one thing that they haven't been able to rein in is really their health and fitness. And they don't like what they see in the mirror. They're frustrated with kind of the position that they've allowed themselves to get to. They don't identify with the lifestyle behaviors that they're, practicing. They're not setting the example that they want for their kids. And they know that they could be showing up better, but all of the things that they've tried ultimately have not worked for them.
What are some of the things that people have tried? Was it a detriment? Like, are you getting people coming that they're on Ozempic or they're on and off of it, or they tried fat diets? Like, what state are people in when they come to see it?
Usually when, if I'm working with a typical 40 to 50-year-old, they've tried a myriad of things, and it's not that they haven't quote unquote worked. The reality, Richard, as probably many of your listeners can resonate with if they've tried to lose weight in the past, is that, the dieting industry lends itself to a whole bunch of overly restrictive, unrealistic dieting methodologies. And so invariably, they've tried some level of, whether it's low carb, keto, carnivore, Whole30, 75 hard, paleo, perhaps they've been on or currently are on GLP-1 drugs or some progression of GLP-1, 2, 3 drugs, which I'm not bashing by any way, shape, or form. And I'm not bashing any of these things. I think they all have their place. But the reality of the nature of the industry is that much of what attracts people to weight loss plans is the notion that it needs to be overly restrictive, or it's kind of like this, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? Just tell me the foods to eat, tell me the foods to not eat. And psychologically, we believe that that's what is going to drive the change that we're looking for. But from a actual behavioral psychology, that's actually the last thing that we need. And so what we do differently and how we help coach clients is by creating that mindset shift away from the overly restrictive mindset. It's in behavioral psychology, it's called dichotomous thinking. And it's very much the black or white, the all or nothing, the good foods, the bad foods way of thinking, which we know very clearly from a research standpoint is actually what keeps people stuck. Because, if anyone listening, if you're a busy parent, you have a career, like you understand the struggles of day-to-day life to the degree that trying to follow a one-size-fits-all meal plan or overly restrictive diet is just not going to work for very long. And so instead, what we help people do is help them, one, create more awareness around their nutrition behaviors so that they can be an adult, so that they can take responsibility, so that they can take ownership over their decisions, and so that they can have autonomy, Richard, around the foods that they want to eat, when they want to eat it, and the amounts that they want to eat it, but also understanding the repercussions of those decisions to the degree that nothing ever ends up being off limits. And when you have that level of flexibility and freedom, it completely changes the relationship to foods and kind of squashes the whole notion around good and bad foods, if that makes sense.
Right. Bad food that you never eat, well, that's really difficult to do. And the good foods are not good foods if you have maybe too much of them, but too off. So it makes sense that not just a black and white thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same as spending and saving money. I mean, we're all adults here, and we have to take ownership over, if we have certain goals at play, and we know we need to save a certain amount, then we have to reel in our spending, and that's going to mean trade-offs. There's decisions that we have to make on a daily basis around how we spend and save. And it's not dissimilar from a nutrition standpoint. It's just giving people the tools and the freedom, right? And the autonomy, like I said, and feeling empowered to know how to make those decisions. And that's where we created what we call your own personal operating system. And it's really the systematic framework of decision-making processes to help you walk through, how do I make the best decision given the circumstances that I'm in, so that I never have to feel like there's things that are off limits, right? So that, okay, I'm traveling, for work. Well, do I drink? Do I not drink? What do I order when I'm going out to dinner? Or I've got the kid's birthday weekend and we've got treats all around, or I'm, on a guy's weekend, and how am I kind of navigating these things so that I never break the proverbial bank and never have to start again Monday, or never have to wait until the new year, and also never have to wait until things feel right, because there's never going to be a right time, right? We're human. We have busy lifestyles to the degree that there's always going to be something that feels like a disruption from the perfect plan. So if we can acknowledge and absolve ourselves from the idea that there is a perfect plan to begin with, well, then we've got full freedom to say, okay, I just need to figure out how to make the best decisions given the circumstances and where the trade-offs lie.
If you, how often can you fall off the wagon, but still say you're on the program? You're like, I understand you're having a tough week, have to use the chocolate cake or whatever. Then how long until you really should do that again in order to, again, to keep the continuity and the efficacy of the program? Once a week, okay? Is it all cheat day okay? Or?
Well, that's the whole deal, man, there is no cheat day. There is no falling off the wagon. If we're taking ownership over our behaviors, then we're acknowledging what we did. But more importantly, we're acknowledging why we did it. What were the circumstances that lent itself to me indulging on the chocolate cake? Did I even want to? Or was I in a situation where I was stressed out, I was emotional, I just said F it, I was angry? Like, what were the circumstances? And this is essentially us creating a situation where we want to reflect on these behaviors, because this is going to happen. Again, we are human. We have this reptilian brain that has evolved to crave sugar and salt and fat. And we are living in a world that has foods that have been, processed and modified to include all of these things, sugar and salt and fat, that lights up the human brain. That's a very, very challenging situation to be in, to the degree that I don't believe anyone should ever have to have this restrictive mindset around, I can't ever have X, Y, Z, or else we find ourselves in these yo-yo dieting patterns. So instead, Richard, it's acknowledging, hey, if and when these things happen, how do we use these as tools and learning opportunities? And this is what we call game film review, is we simply acknowledge the situation, we take ownership over it. Maybe we for a lot of our clients, we track our calorie intake and we acknowledge, that was 2,000 extra calories. Okay, that's not good or bad or anything. It's just what is. And so based on that, what could I do differently the next time I'm in this situation, the next time I'm experiencing the same stressors, the next time I'm in this environment, the next time I'm around these types of people that contribute to making the decisions that weren't in line with my goals? And that's the learning process. That's the skill development. And that's how we teach people the skills and tools and behaviors to be able to make the best decisions, so that when you want a piece of chocolate cake, you have a piece of chocolate cake. Or maybe you only want a few bites. Or maybe you decide, hey, I'm going to have chocolate cake tonight, and because I'm going to enjoy some chocolate cake, I'm going to make some modifications earlier on in the day, or maybe earlier on in the week, in order to bank some of those calories, because that's what weight loss is all about. It's about creating a manageable calorie intake and a calorie deficit. And hey, that's the same way we would approach spending too, right? If I wanted to buy a watch, I might have to modify my spending behaviors for the next few weeks, months, whatever.
What happens to you clients like, man, I screwed up, man, I ate this week. I want to get back on track, but I feel like maybe I've ruined it or something. What do I do?
Yeah, so it's like I just said. I mean, that's the thing, is when you have unconditional permission, this is about learning to live in the gray, because we work with a lot of hard charging individuals who, again, are successful in business. They have a busy family life, and maybe they're ex-athletes, and they kind of are very analytical And so perhaps what got them in the position that they're in the career has been kind of being very driven and sort of being in a position to make these decisions. We need to teach them that it's okay to live in the gray and there is no black and white. And so when you have unconditional permission, then we simply just acknowledge, you know what? No, this is a great learning opportunity. You made decisions that we can acknowledge were not in line with your goals. And so that's fine. Like, so it ended up being higher in calories for a day or 2 or 3 or even a week. Big deal. All we need to do is make your next meal in line with the goals. How do we continue to reinforce the behaviors that are going to drive the outcome that we're looking for? And the more that you reinforce those behaviors, the more I stack wins in terms of, did I build out a structured meal? Did I eat enough protein at this meal? Did I get my exercise in? Did I go to sleep on time? Did I wake up early enough to be able to go out and get a walk in? The more you reinforce this structure and what we call these foundational principles, the more evidence you build around this new identity that we're creating, to the degree that you stop becoming the type of person who feels like they need to cheat, the type of person who feels like they blew it on the weekend and needs to start again Monday, the type of person that can't manage a social situation without having 2 or 3 cocktails to get lubed up just so that they can be social, right? So it's fundamentally changing your behaviors and your identity to try and create the results that you're looking for.
How long does it take on average for someone to, for you to say, or the person to say, okay, this is the new me, this is how I do things, and they're different from the old way, and I'm okay with that. I'm not freaking out. I'm settled in. I feel like, I could live like this now.
Yeah, it's a great question. It totally depends on the person. Some people 6 months, some people a year, some people 2 years. I mean, we have clients who've been with us 5 or 6 years. Our average clients are with us for 2.5 years, simply because there's always room to progress. There's room to get stronger. There's room to get leaner. There's room to improve the behaviors. One of the biggest components is simply just having some accountability around this process. Having someone almost like a co-pilot or a Sherpa, if you will, that's kind of walking side by side, sometimes carrying the packs, sometimes just showing you what the right direction to go in, teaching you how to overcome the roadblocks and the obstacles and the crevices, if you will, that fundamentally and invariably are going to get in your way, who has, treaded that path before. Because oftentimes for our clientele, the first 6 months to a year is about kind of getting rid of some of that problematic weight and really truly changing the nutrition behaviors. And then beyond that is really learning how to reinforce those behaviors through the various seasons of life, right? The seasons of, hey, it's the holidays, it's spring break, it's summer, we're traveling with the family, it's an uber stressful time at work, and I am like grinding. How do I maintain that semblance of structure and control? Now I really want to hard charge and, get leaner for my beach vacation coming up in 3 or 4 months. We all have these different seasons that we cycle through, and it takes time to, again, like you were saying, to become the type of person that doesn't continue to reinforce the behaviors around, quote unquote, falling off the wagon.
What stages do people go through once they've had success, they lost weight, they feel better, etc.? What is the next stage? What is the next? Is it just maintaining from there, or is there higher levels to go to?
I mean, we're always moving the goalposts. There's so much that we can do. And this is what's cool about, listen, I'm sure you've probably interviewed plenty of people in the quote unquote biohacking space. And I'm not a huge fan of that term biohacking, but there's always opportunities to improve. So once we have the fundamental principles around, your dedicated nutrition, your meal frequency, your training, if you're focusing on getting stronger in the gym, if you're moving your body frequently enough, if we've dialed in your sleep, then it's really like, we look at full health optimization. We look at blood work. We look at, we align with a team of medical professionals who can help in terms of making sure that blood work looks, quote unquote, optimal, right? Because this is beyond just the normal labs that your typical GP will run. Normal for most of us in America is Homer Simpson. And that's not the normalcy that I imagine most of your listeners want to align with. We want to be outliers. And so in order to do that, we have to look at, okay, what more needs to be done from a health optimization standpoint, from a supplement standpoint, from a blood work? Is there from a medication, maybe from a peptide standpoint? And then ultimately, from like a more of a quote unquote, again, for lack of a better term, biohacking standpoint of where can we move the needle in the most aggressive way relative to our goals with the least amount of effort. And this is just progressively moving the goalposts.
What's your thought about the GLP inhibitors, so Ozempic, Mounjaro, et cetera? You have a lot of clients that are on them already when they come to you. Like, what are your thoughts there?
They're good observations.
Yes. So again, it completely depends on the person. I am not opposed to them. I think they are actually a fantastic tool. Again, depending on the person, where they are on their journey, whether they're actually need it from like a type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, if they're significantly overweight, what they've tried in the past in terms of weight loss. At the end of the day, we still can't absolve ourselves of practicing the fundamental behaviors around, listen, I need to make sure I'm moving enough on a daily basis. I need to make sure I'm strength training to maintain, if not improve, lean muscle tissue. Muscle is the most valuable organ that we have, that by having more of it, and not just muscle strength as well from a quality of life and from a longevity standpoint, but ultimately having more muscle mass to a degree is only going to serve us well from a metabolic standpoint, from a body composition, from a health energy standpoint. So regardless of whether or not you are considering or on GLPs, that is a non-negotiable in my world. Second to that, which goes hand in hand with lean muscle tissue, is making sure you're eating enough protein relative to your desired body weight and eating enough overall nutrition from whole, real food. And there's a number of practices and principles around how do I eat enough whole food, my planning, my preparation techniques, my structure. If I eat out a lot, how am I navigating that to control for calories? So I think you can see that a lot of what we do is giving people and helping give people the tools to navigate their day to day around controlling for calories and optimizing body composition. And then if we layer on top of that, okay, great, maybe there is a place for GLP-1. Now it totally depends on the person around, are we looking at a semaglutide, which is like Ozempic? Are we looking at tirzepatide, which is like Mounjaro? Are we looking, now there's GLP-3 drugs like retatrutide, which is fantastic because that's looking at GLP-1, GLP-2, and glucagon, and really has some significant metabolic and fat loss benefits beyond just the 1 and the 2. That's obviously between the prescribing practitioner and physician and the patient, but we do work with plenty of clients who have been on them and are no longer on them, are currently on them, or go on them through the process, just because this is the world that we're living in now. And I think it's only going to get exponentially better in terms of the quality of these drugs, the efficacy of these drugs. It's all contingent, in my opinion, though, on all of the nutrition and lifestyle behaviors to determine how effective they're really going to be long term.
Well, there's always trade-offs that I've seen in life. So if someone, what is easier about your program if someone's on? What's harder about it if someone's on one of these?
There's nothing that's easier or harder. Listen, at the end of the day, it's pretty hard to argue that fat loss and weight loss specifically is a lot easier if you're on a GLP medication, simply because, and depends on which one, but simply because of the appetite control, because of the blunting of the food noise. And then, like I was saying, even with the retatrutide, the GLP-3, it seems that there really is a sort of an enhanced fat loss effect. So I would be remiss if I didn't suggest that weight loss and fat loss do become easier because of these drugs, because it helps you control for calories that much more. And so, beyond that, though, the hard part becomes taking responsibility for your day-to-day actions. And what I would say the biggest problem with the drugs that I've experienced with clientele and just, networking with other coaches who work with clients that are on these drugs and other physicians who work with patients that are on these drugs is that if you're someone who doesn't have these behaviors in place, yet you're seeing the trajectory on the scale move in a positive direction, you're potentially less likely to go out of your way to change your behaviors because you're getting the outcome that you want, not realizing that over the long term, it's not going to work out favorably for you. So we see, right. So you may not be moving enough. You may not be eating enough protein because your calories are low. You may be losing more lean muscle tissue than you realize, which happens when we're in an aggressive calorie deficit. And so the most powerful thing that we can do in conjunction with the GLPs unequivocally is making sure that we're doing everything we can to support lean muscle tissue. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself a year or two down the road and you might weigh less, but you might have just as much body fat. You might be just as metabolically deranged. I mean, listen, it's hard to say if you're...
So as you're older too, if he's 30 versus 50 or 60, now you can really, osteoporosis.
Now you're in trouble because we have sarcopenia. You're exactly right. We have sarcopenia, we have osteoporosis, or even osteopenia, which is leading up to osteoporosis. If you're a female and you're going through menopause, if you're a male and you're going through andropause, and you have this stark reduction in sex hormones, then we're all of a sudden now we're in a situation where we have a much harder time actually building muscle mass than when we're younger. And so I am very adamant about the best thing that you can do when you're younger is build these behaviors, build as much lean muscle tissue as you possibly can within reason, right? So that we're setting the stage for later life, right? We're setting the stage for the aging process, the quality of life that we want to live, because I guarantee there's probably a lot of people that are listening to this episode who can think about the quality of their parents' life and imagine, gosh, yeah, they might be living longer, but I can assure you that the quality of their life is not as good as it could be had they been physically active and been more proactive about their nutrition, lifestyle, and training when they were younger.
Just a couple more questions. We're almost done. So what would you say makes your program uniquely successful versus others?
It's exactly what I talked about. I mean, it's shifting the mindset away from conventional dieting methodology. You said in the introduction, real world weight loss or real world fat loss. Real world fat loss, like realistic weight loss and making long-term sustainable change, revolves around changing our mindset around food and these lifestyle behaviors and taking extreme ownership over these behaviors to develop the skills and tools to be able to be consistent. And the biggest problem that we experience when you scroll through your social media feed, and you probably listen to all these podcasts with influencers and health gurus who are promoting these one-size-fits-all diets, is that for most people, it's just not realistic. Now, I've been doing this for 20 years now, working with all calibers of individual, and one of the things I understand the best is how human psychology factors into this process. And yet no one talks about human psychology. They talk about calorie intake, they talk about macros, they talk about exercise regimens, they talk about supplementation, they talk about biohacking, they talk about GLP drugs, right? But no one is talking about the change that needs to happen between the ears. And so with our Prime Fit OS coaching process, we help build the operating system for you to navigate all of these nuances of real world life, all of the proverbial roadblocks that are going to get in our way, and how do we tread around those in a way that helps us not fall off the quote unquote, fall off the wagon.
Okay, excellent. Well, then what's the best way for people to reach you? Like, where can they live and exist where you can help?
Yeah, well, I'm sure you'll have the links in the show notes, but our website is bodysystems.com. Pretty active on social media, particularly Instagram at Body Systems Coaching. And then I have a podcast as well called the Smart Nutrition Made Simple Show. And this is where, I talk with other experts in health, nutrition, fitness, hormone optimization around these very practices and principles to help give people like your listeners the tools and skills to be able to take immediate action around these types of things, as well as really set the precedence for what real world weight loss and health change and building, like I said, unshakable confidence and limitless self-belief really looks like.
Well, very good, Ben. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast and talking about your the uniqueness of what you do. And mindset is everything, because if your mind's not on board, forget it. It's just going to take you to places you don't want to go. So makes sense.
Well, I appreciate having me, Richard. Thank you so much.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.